I've always believed you can control anything with clean terms and the right signature. 6 months for a paper marriage. No feelings, no mess, no variance. No one warned me that the contract would end with a heartbeat. I couldn't schedule a promise that wasn't in any appendix. The press conference lights burned hot enough to feel like a deposition. I stood at the podium, one hand at the small of Emma Collins's back, my wife, placed into my life by PR, like a line item in enterprise risk management. Eyes up, hold the smile, my comms lead whispered. I did. The room clicked and flashed. Thank you for being here, I said. At Reed Tech, we put trust and family first. A man with a steady home is a man you can trust. Applause. Emma smiled at the exact angle our media coach drilled, quiet as a secret. She was tense under my palm. A violin string tightened one turn past comfort. My job was to keep the string from snapping at least until the IPO. 6 months earlier. It rained the way only San Francisco knows, slant and cold, like correction. I knocked on the door of her studio. A hospital statement lay on the table in plain view, a cardiac unit bill in 4 figures. I didn't look twice. I hadn't come to pity. We've worked together before, I said. And you once cost me a week putting out fires. You here to relitigate or reconcile? She asked, knuckles white on her cardigan. Neither. I set a manila envelope on the table. A proposal. She slid the documents out. 2 words knocked the air out of the room. Marriage agreement. I went straight to the terms. 6 months. Public marriage, separate finances. Stipend, 1 million, paid on completion. No intimate relationship. No children, no leaks. Counsel ready to notarize downstairs. Why me? She asked. Because you're disciplined, discreet, and don't chase cameras, I said. I didn't add the rest. I remembered her face the day I signed her termination. No tears, no pleading, just a direct look that asked if I was sure. In my world, certainty is a professional reflex. She read slowly, lips pressed flat. I could hear the rain in the downspout like a second hand. Then she signed, clean, decisive. No shake. We were married 3 weeks later in a private wine. Country resort where the staff signed NDAs bigger than their W-2 South. No rings. No vows. Just cameras and a witness. Give me a kiss, the photographer said, cheerful like he was directing a toothpaste ad. I leaned in. Cedar and something quiet, maybe green, tea lived at the hollow of her throat. The kiss was a touch, professionally tasteful. My pulse didn't jump, or I'd trained it not to. We moved into a glass Anstel penthouse on the 42nd floor, overlooking the 2 strangers sharing a calendar. Mornings, we ate in front of floor 2 ceiling windows, so the long lens guys on Fremont could sell a model couple shot to the tabloids. Days, we worked. Nights, we parted like actors rehearsing exits. Ever regret choosing me? She asked one evening while I edited the roadshow deck. No, I said without looking up. You're delivering the role. I assumed that was enough. A charity gala proved me wrong. Emma wore white simple lines, nothing loud. I took her arm. The cameras loved the geometry. Couple of the night, the MC declared. As we stepped off the dais, her heel slid. I caught her hand. I didn't let go right away. Light pooled in her eyes, warm brown, steady and unperformed. I heard myself say, quiet and not for the room, don't worry. I've got you, the room's. She nodded. For the first time, I realized my grip was too tight. That night, I reviewed talking points, unable to ignore one boring sentence. Family signals, stability, suddenly loud as a siren. I flipped to clause 9. No intimacy, no children. Steel words. I'm comfortable with steel. I thought I was forged from it. From that stairwell on, something in me drifted a degree. Nothing anyone else would notice. Enough that I heard my own breathing louder than the camera shutters. Enough that when she passed my office, I looked up without a reason any coup would accept. A contract is only paper. I've told 1,000 people that. Sometimes the flimsiest thing ties tighter than gold. The morning after the gala, I built a house schedule like a spreadsheet. Breakfast time, dish placement, elevator photo windows, cleaners and dry cleaning drops, media traps to avoid. I sent it to my assistant and to Emma. She read it all, nodded, and asked one question. If I don't smile at a camera, is there a fine? No, then we're fine. Day 3, I found her in the kitchen at 6:10 a.m. Hair up, white blouse buttoned all the way, staring out at a city still asleep in marine layer. She poured hot water over a tea sachet and listened to it fill the cup like it was a metronome. What time do you get up? I asked. 5:30. I like to be here before the sun, she said, handing me a mug. Try this. Not in your appendices, but it might keep you from living on espresso. Jasmine and something verdant cut through the coffee smoke that usually owned my mornings. For the first time, my 4-page house rules felt loud. 2 weeks later, I noticed a habit. Every night before lights out, she placed her phone face down on the nightstand. Why? I asked. So when the hospital calls, I take one breath before I look, she said. She didn't say which hospital. She didn't have to. The invoice on her kitchen table had branded itself behind my eyes. I called the chief of staff at St. Francis between strategy meetings. In this town, things move along, threads visible, if you know what to tug. I arranged a transfer for her father's case to a better surgeon, pulled the procedure forward, and routed funding through a Reed Foundation pool labeled Anonymous Assistance. I told myself anonymous was cleaner. I forgot that nothing tied to a person you might be learning to love is ever anonymous. She found out immediately. That night she leaned against the kitchen counter, cradling tea, and looked at me like a math problem missing a variable. What did you do to my dad's case? Second opinion. Moved the date. Covered the gap, I said. With whose money? The foundation's, I said. It's reasonable, why? She didn't raise her voice. Somehow it still cut. I protect what's attached to me, I said too fast. My stock, my name, and I stopped. And my household by contract. She said, I should have given a polished line about optics. Instead, I shut up. She rinsed her cup clear water, no tea stain, and set it in the rack. Thank you, she said. Next time, ask me first. I want to know what I'm leaning on. She brushed past me. The tea's quiet scent lingered. Control isn't always protection. First lesson the contract didn't cover. A week later, a July thunderhead rolled in like a blackout curtain. At 9:20, the lights snapped off. Generators took 3 long minutes to boot. In the dark, you hear your heart. I found a thumb of light in the living room. Emma sat on the floor by the windows, a single taper candle between us. You okay? I asked. Yeah, she said. When the power died at my mum's place, she'd light a candle and tell a story. I thought I'd grow out of needing that. Turns out, not yet. I sat on the opposite sill. The candle made a small gold country between us. Tell it, I said. I might need a narrative that isn't a prospectus. She told me about a girl who used numbers like armor. I laughed it quickly and said the character was familiar. If you're laughing, she said, you get it. Then, softly, when did you learn to keep people at arm's length? When my mother told me everything has a price if you pay it in the right place. The candle bent under a draft, then stood back up. I hemorrhaged at 9 months. She signed off on an experimental therapy before the board did. I lived. Since then, I trust people who sign first and ask later. I didn't add the rest. I learnt to collect signatures before letting anyone close. She didn't tell me to forgive. She said, not every choice that saved you is right for someone else. Soft enough not to scold. Straight enough to land. When the lights kicked back, I stood to shield her eyes from the sudden white. No script told me to. Thanks, she said, blinking. After that, I came home late to a kitchen lamp on and a warm mug waiting. No note, no smiley face. Just heat. The next day, my mother called, open as sharp as a paper cut. Don't soften, Eleanor said. No feelings. Don't fall. When the IPO closes, the girl goes. You remember clause 9? I remember, I said, eyeing the cup still warm on the counter. And don't call her the girl. She's a variable. Markets don't tolerate variables named after women. Eleanor's conclusions always arrived dressed as principles. I hung up and felt the thought age out as it hit the air. I couldn't name what replaced it, only that it was lighter. I attempted breakfast once, burned the eggs. Buttersmoke set off the hush alarm. You have many talents, Emma said from the doorway, smiling for the first time since the ceremony. Cooking isn't on the list. I can acquire the skill, I said, plating the ruin like a Michelin prank. Not everything can be bought, she said, shaking a little salt over the edges. But you can learn. She sat, ate a bite, winced, ate another. I laughed, and for the first time in weeks, it wasn't for a camera. We kept bumping into each other hallway, elevator, the little domestic no man's land, where scripts go to die. One night, I came in with rain in my hair. She handed me a towel. Her fingers grazed my collar. We both paused. We both pulled back not because of clause 9, but because the room felt new, after a fundraiser that ran long. We changed sides of the bedroom in parallel, me loosening a tie, her unclasping an earring, ordinary. That's what made it dangerous. If there weren't cameras, I said, catching my own pronouns sliding, what would you call me? Alexander, she said. Then, after a beat, or Alex, if you ever want to be less sharp. And if there weren't a contract, I asked, what would I call you? She waited. I heard myself say, the person who's here. When here hit the carpet, I was already in front of her, close enough to see the faint scatter of freckles on her left cheekbone. No photographer, no legal counsel, no mother, no board, no clause 9 suspended like a guillotine. I kissed her, not the Prescott peck. Breath met breath, the way to people who've been reading from the wrong pages finally find the same line. She kissed me back, hesitant, then sure. Like unlocking a door she'd thought was sublet forever. We can stop here, she whispered, forehead to mine. I don't want to cross a line just because we're tired. Okay, I said. No rush, no proof to anyone. We sat for a long time in the big leather chair by the window, listening to a city teach itself how to heal after a day. But what is stop? In finance, you stop at solution. In life, solutions move. The next week we crossed the line with a quietness that made the border irrelevant. Not impulsive, not drunk, just ready. When Clause 9 slid off our shoulders, I didn't feel illegal. I felt alive. The morning after, she woke earlier than usual. I woke to the soft, arrhythmic sounds of a woman in the bathroom who doesn't want to wake anyone. She came out, a shade paler than normal, then composed as ever. "You okay?" I asked. "Probably the tea," she said, gentle. She brewed ginger. I set the table. 2 mugs steamed into a foggy dawn. Outside, the Bay Bridge shouldered off the last of the marine layer. The day moved like days do. That night, a new reminder pinged on my calendar I hadn't set, by ginger tea. A fresh box sat on the counter. No announcement. Just a breadcrumb from a change big enough to redraw maps. That evening, I pulled the contract from the desk, drawer, and flipped to Clause 9. I drew a narrow line through it, not for legal filing, just so my eyes would accept what my body already knew. I thought of my mother and her "don't fall." I thought of a man in bed 7, waiting on a valve repair, and the absurd fact that my foundation had paid for a stranger because she wasn't a stranger anymore. I thought of Emma's hands around a ginger mug and a new quiet, pouring into the apartment like sun after rain. I've long believed everything important can be signed. What came next wasn't signed in ink. It was signed in rhythm. And I, someone who makes a life out of terms, was learning a new language. The measure of the breath beside mine. I didn't know that somewhere in the bathroom cabinet a thin stick had just revealed a second faint line. From the moment it appeared, every spreadsheet I'd ever trusted would be politely useless. The first weeks of living together looked like a spreadsheet I could trust columns for time, rows for tasks, notes for shared spaces. I wrote house rules the way other people write love letters, for pages precise as code. Breakfast at 6:30, elevator photo coincidences at 8:05 and 8:40, to catch different commuter cycles, media traps to avoid, a cleaning cadence that would make a Navy chief proud. Emma read every line and nodded. If I forget to smile at a camera, is there a fine? She asked, "No, then we're fine." I expected discipline to be enough. That's the thing about discipline, it works until real life walks in and sits down without asking. Day 3. 6:10 a.m. I walked into the kitchen and found her watching a city still wrapped in marine layer. Hair twisted up, white blouse buttoned to the collar. She was steeping tea with the focus of a surgeon. Pause, breathe. The apartment was so quiet, I heard the first drop hit porcelain. "What time do you get up?" I asked. 5:30. I like the hour before the sun decides what kind of day it's going to be. She handed me a mug. Jasmine. Consider it an intervention. I drink coffee like a machine, measured, bitter, black. The tea cut straight through the habit. It didn't make me sentimental. It made my 4 pages feel loud. There's a difference. 2 weeks in, I noticed she always placed her phone face down on the nightstand before bed. "Why?" I asked. "So when the hospital calls, I have time to take one breath before I look," she said. She didn't have to say which hospital. I'd seen the cardiac bill the night I brought the contract. In this city, favors ride networks. I phoned St. Francis, pushed the case to a better surgeon, pulled the procedure forward, and paid the delta through a Reed Foundation fund labeled Anonymous Care. Anonymous felt elegant in my head. In practice, nothing is anonymous if it's tied to a person you might be learning to care about. She found out before lunch. That night, she leaned into the counter, tea shielding her hands, eyes level. What did you do to my dad's case? Second opinion. Moved the date. Covered the gap. With whose money? The foundation's. It was appropriate. Why? Not a challenge. A scalpel. I protect what's attached to me, I said, faster than I should have. My stock, my name, and I stopped. And my household by contract. She asked. There are 8 polished lies I could have told about optics and board confidence. I used none of them. She rinsed the cup until the water ran clear. Thank you, she said. Next time, ask me first. I want to know what I'm leaning on. She walked past. The steam followed her, quiet and floral. Control isn't the same as protection. First clause I'd never written. A July storm rolled in like a legal brief, heavy, inevitable. At 9:20 p.m., the lights cut out. The generators needed 3 long minutes to find themselves. In the dark, the building breathed, and so did we. I found a candle flickering by the windows. Emma sat on the rug, knees up, the city reduced to shadow and rain. You okay? I asked. Yeah. When the power went out where I grew up, my mum lit a candle and told a story. I used to think I'd age out of needing that. Guess not. I sat opposite her, the candle a small country between us. Tell one, I said. Something not about EBITDA. She told me about a girl who hid in numbers because they never changed the rules on her mid-game. I laughed, quiet, honest. If you're laughing, she said, you get it. Your turn. When did I learn distance? I watched the flame bend and right itself. When my mother told me everything has a price if you pay it in the right place. When I was 9 months old, I hemorrhaged. She signed off on an unapproved therapy. I lived. I've trusted signatures ever since. She didn't absolve or judge. Not every decision that saved you is right for someone else, she said. Soft enough that I didn't raise a defense. Straight enough that I heard it. The power snapped back. Without thinking, I stood to block the first white shock from her eyes. Thanks, she said, blinking up into the halo of the kitchen pendant. It was nothing. It was also the kind of nothing contracts never capture. The next morning, Eleanor called. She doesn't do hello. Don't soften, my mother said. Feelings are liabilities. When the IPO closes, the girl goes. Remember clause 9. I remember, I said, and stop calling her the girl. She's a variable. Markets don't tolerate variables named after women. Her pronouncements always arrive dressed as wisdom. I hung up and realized the suit didn't fit like it used to. 2 days later, I made breakfast, which is to say, I burned eggs. Butter smoke tripped the hush alarm. Emma appeared in the doorway and smiled for the first time since the wedding. You have many talents, she said. Cooking isn't on the list. I can acquire the skill. Not everything can be bought, but you can learn. She salted the edges and ate a bite anyway, winced, ate another. I laughed out loud. No cameras, no choreography, just a badly fried egg and a human reaction. After that, we bumped into each other in the seams of the Datha elevator, the hallway, the unregulated minutes. One night I came in late with rain in my hair. She handed me a towel. Her fingers touched my collar, a static snap of warmth. We both paused and stepped back, not because of Clause 9, but because the room had shifted an inch toward something unnamed. A fundraiser ran long. Back home, we undid our armor in parallel Mai Tai, her earrings an ordinary duet. If there weren't cameras, I said, surprised at my own pronouns, what would you call me? Alexander, she said. Or Alex, if you ever want to be less sharp. And if there weren't a contract, I asked, what would I call you? She waited me out, which is a talent. The person who's here, I said. By the time he landed, I was already standing in front of her, close enough to see the constellation of faint freckles near her left cheekbone. No photographer, no counsel, no board, no mother, no blade of Clause 9 suspended overhead. I kissed her, not the publicist-approved press peck. Breath met breath, like two people who'd been reciting from the wrong pages and finally find the same line. She answered hesitant, then decided like a lock she'd assumed belonged to someone else and realized was hers. We can stop here, she whispered, forehead to mine. I don't want to cross a line just because we're exhausted, okay? No proof to anyone. We sat in a leather chair by the window until the city quieted. You can hear a skyline settle if you're willing to be still enough. But stop is a word with edges that blur. In finance, you stop at solution. In life, solutions move. The next week, we crossed the line quietly, not as rebellion, but as recognition. When Clause 9 slid off our shoulders, nothing shattered. Something aligned. Morning after, she woke earlier than usual. I heard the soft choreography of a woman trying not to wake a room, the medicine cabinet's hush, the faucet's careful whisper. She came out a shade paler, then back to herself. You okay? I asked. Probably the tea, she said, and reached for ginger. I set the table. 2 mugs breathed into a fogged pane. The Bay Bridge shrugged off the last of the marine layer like a man straightening his coat. Work moved, like it always does. Calls decks, rooms where I translate risk into comfort. That night, a calendar alert pinged I hadn't created. By ginger tea. A fresh box sat by the stove. No note. Some contracts write themselves without ink. In grocery lists and standing appointments you didn't realize you'd made. After she went to bed, I pulled the agreement from my desk. Clause 9 stared back like a dare. I drew a thin line through the paragraph, not for the lawyers, for my eyes. A ceremonial acknowledgement of a truth already in circulation. I thought of my mother and her don't soften. I thought of the man in bed 7 who would go under surgeon's light sooner because a fund I usually deploy at a distance had drifted into my home. I thought of Emma's hands curling around a warm cup and the silence that had begun to live here, not the brittle kind, the good kind. I've always believed the important things in life announce themselves with signatures. What came next didn't. It announced itself in rhythm. I was learning a new language, the measure of the breath beside mine. I didn't know that in the bathroom, behind the mirror, a thin wand had just acquired a second faint line. From that moment, every model I've ever trusted would become a story problem with a variable I had sworn not to allow and suddenly could not imagine. Subtracting that, there are tells you don't notice until you've been watching the same room for weeks. The way someone stands when they're bracing. The things they stop eating without announcing it. The new gravity around their mornings. Emma stopped drinking coffee entirely. She stocked ginger in the pantry like a hedge fund. She moved slower first thing, then overcorrected, like she didn't want anyone seeing the slowdown. If you've spent your adult life in rooms where weakness gets monetized, you learn to spot the way people hide it. Day 28, after the line I drew through clause 9. I came home to find a brown pharmacy bag folded into a square and slid to the very back of the recycling. I didn't dig it out. I just stood there with the fridge open long enough for the compressor to kick on and then shut it again. I make a living reading what isn't said. Suddenly, I wanted to be very careful with what I knew and how I knew it. The call came from St. Francis 2 mornings later, not from her father's surgeon, from a benefits coordinator who should never have dialed me directly, Mr. Reed. Quick, heads up, something odd hit the Retech Health Portaler prenatal authorization request linked to your household. Our system flagged it, given your media watch, and stop. I didn't raise my voice. You don't have to when you've been trained to move a room with volume alone. You shouldn't be calling me. Close the loop. No one else needs that information. Click. I stared at the phone until its black rectangle stared back. I found her on the balcony, bundled in a sweatshirt against a bay wind that smelled like metal and loam. The city was doing its morning performance ferries, joggers, trash trucks, all of it pretending not to be choreography. Emma, I said. She didn't turn. If you're cancelling the photographer for the elevator shot, text me. I'll change my shoes. I'm not cancelling. I walked out beside her. I need to ask you something I don't have the right to ask. She closed her eyes, breathed in, breathed out. You already know, don't you? I know enough to know I'm at the edge of a line. I waited. I'm good at waiting when the alternative is forcing. She opened her eyes and looked straight into me, not through me, not past me. I'm pregnant, she said. 6 weeks, maybe 7. I took 2 tests. I have an appointment this afternoon in Marin where no one knows my name. A set of numbers rearrange themselves behind my eyes. In boardrooms, when models break, you argue the input. Life doesn't let you litigate a heartbeat. Do you want me there? I asked. Silence. Morning fog peeled back a little. I don't know what I want you to be, she said. The contract says one thing. My body says another. The world you live in says both are a liability. The world I live in can be told to wait outside a door, I said. She almost smiled. Has it ever obeyed you when you said that? It was my turn to breathe. I can at least make sure it doesn't follow you to a doctor's office. She studied me. You won't tell anyone. No, then, because precision matters, unless you want me to. We drove over the bridge in the kind of quiet that isn't hostile, 2 people holding their own oxygen masks in place. Marin smells different than the city, eucalyptus and money. I parked behind a Pilates studio 3 doors down from the clinic, and we walked like 2 people who do errands together, inside. No one looked up. The nurse took her name like any other Tuesday. I sat in a chair built to soothe men who don't do well in rooms, painted in sea glass colors, and answered email I didn't read. When a door opened and she said my name, it wasn't loud, but it was enough. You can come, she said. A sonographer, gloved up, screens warmed. A wand found a place and sound filled the room, a soft whoosh whoosh that changed the air pressure. I've closed deals for billions that felt abstract compared to that noise. There, the technician said, tapping a grey blur inside a darker blur, measuring small but appropriate for dates. I tried to thank her, and realized my voice didn't work right. Emma stared at the monitor, expression unreadable. There is a particular courage in letting the world happen to you and not moving. On the way back, halfway across the span, my phone lit up with a name I almost never ignore. Eleanor. I let it ring out and die. It lit again. I killed the sound. You can answer, Emma said. I can also not, I said. She looked at the Golden Gate's paint like it was a brand new color. I won't be a secret, she said. Not a demand. A fact describing the physics of what would and wouldn't happen next. I don't want you to be, I said. Also, a fact. Inventing plain sentences felt like harder work than any strategy memo I've ever. GHOSTWRITTEN. Eleanor waited at the penthouse. When we got back, which means someone on staff forgot what private means or someone decided their bonus needed guarding, she stood with the city behind her, every window at our back turning her into a shadow with pearls. You didn't take my calls, she said. I was driving. I said, and now you're home. She smiled at Emma like a jury foreman might at a defendant she's already convicted. Leave us. I didn't move. No, Eleanor's expression didn't change. That's her craft. Then I'll be direct. The clause you tore up in your head exists on paper. This pregnancy puts a regulatory spotlight where we don't need it. There are boards in 2 countries waiting to see if you can keep your personal life cordoned. There is no scandal tolerance left in the timetable. This isn't a scandal, I said. It's a child. It is a risk with a heartbeat, she said, like maybe she thought she was meeting me halfway. She turned her head toward Emma without fully bestowing her attention. I will make you whole. 7 figures wired this afternoon. Non-disclosure as robust as our council can draft. You will have the best care and no one will ever know your name. Do it early. Do it clean. Then disappear. Emma didn't look at me. She looked at my mother the way I've always wanted to and rarely managed does. If the power in the room wasn't a weather system but a choice, no. She said. Eleanor nodded once, as if cataloguing the response. I expected sentiment. Let me adjust your incentives. If you carry to term, the press will eat you for sport, and they will eat my company with you. Every shareholder lawsuit will include your face. Alexander's fiduciary duty will collide with whatever you think you feel. You will lose. He will lose. The child will lose, most of all. The child isn't a calculus error, Emma said. Her voice didn't rise. And I don't need you to tell me what I'll lose. My mother's eyes slid to me. Control your situation, she said, or the market will. I'm not a market, I said. I'm a person. Eleanor laughed softly, which is worse than when she doesn't. You're a CEO until you resign. After that, you can be a person in Marin with a dog and a garden. Until then, you are scale, leverage, guidance, and beat. Choose like a man who understands where he sits. Out, I said. Excuse me. Leave my house, I said again. She didn't argue. She catalogued me instead, the way she does with men she built and now finds ungainly. By dinner, every proxy advisor will know. By morning, the board will ask if you can still carry the roadshow. If you say family first into a microphone, you will have our valuation. If you don't, you will have yourself. Either way, something gets cut. She put a white envelope on the console table as she left. Emma didn't touch it. Neither did I. The door clicked shut. The apartment changed pressure again. Are you going to choose your company? Emma asked. No theatrics. Just the one question that matters when you've spent a decade defining yourself by things. That filed 10Ks in April. I don't know if I can choose the company and still look you in the eye, I said. I do know I can't let her buy my child out of existence. Emma swallowed. Her hand found the back of a chair and then left it, as if rejecting the idea of needing furniture. I need to think, she said, and not in a room with your mother's envelope in it. Take the bedroom, I said. I'll go walk a block and fire my doorman. That got the smallest smile, which, given the day, felt like proof of life. Don't fire him. He's just working in your weather system, she said, which is part of the problem. She disappeared down the hall. I stared at the city and the envelope and the empty space where my mother had been and tried to write the correct sentence. There wasn't one. I went downstairs. I didn't fire the doorman. I sat in the back of the lobby and watched a woman in yoga pants let her golden doodle drag her into the crosswalk like joy is a leash. No one bothers to shorten. I thought about Emma in a clinic in Meran, listening to a sound you can't unhear. I thought about boardrooms that equate complexity with danger. I thought about the single most dangerous assumption I've ever carried, that I could live my life like a series of successful mitigations. When I came back up, the envelope was gone. In its place was a post-it on the console table. Other people's office supplies, suddenly ours. I need a night. Don't call. Don't fix. I read it 3 times. It was the kindest sentence anyone had thrown me in years. It told me exactly what not to do. At midnight, the security feed pinged my phone a movement alert from the private elevator. Emma with an overnight bag, hood up, face down. The kind of posture you take when you're trying not to become content. I didn't follow. I let her have her night because she asked for it and because I don't want to be a man who replaces one kind of pressure with another and calls it love. I stood at the windows while the bay turned black to mercury and back to black. Around 2 a.m. my phone lit. Not a call. A message from an unknown number. We know about the appointment. Choose the company or the story writes itself. I'd stared at the text until the letters unhooked from the threat and sorted into meaning. The thing about models is they break at the joints you didn't think were joints. I deleted the message, then sat down and wrote an email to the board chair that started. We need to talk about guidance and ended, also. We need to talk about what it means to be human in public. At 5:41 a.m., the door opened. Emma walked in with eyes that had decided something. If I stay, she said, it's not because of your mother, or your board, or your foundation. It's because you can look me in the face in a room that's on fire and not blink. I asked. She nodded once. Yes, but understand me. I won't let a company convince me my child is a rounding error. And I won't be hidden. If you can't stand with me in daylight, say it now. I have signed more documents than I can remember. The only answer that mattered didn't need a pen. I'll stand with you in daylight, I said. Whatever that breaks, we'll sweep together. She exhaled, a sound as human as the one we'd heard on a screen 24 hours earlier. Then we make a plan, she said, because your mother will not stop being your mother. And markets do not stop being markets just because we decide to be people. We sat at the kitchen island with ginger tea between us and built something contracts are bad at capturing. A strategy that makes room for a life. It was ugly and flawed and good. At 7:12 a.m., my mother sent an email with a single sentence. The adult choice is the one that keeps the machine running. I replied with one of my own. The adult choice is telling the machine when it has to wait. There's a moment in every negotiation when the number stops mattering. You know it when you hear it's your stomach goes quiet instead of your head. That morning, the number arrived in a PDF from outside counsel with the subject line so polite it hid the threat. Revised resolution framework, 8 figures, wired in to tranches. A home in Tiburon held in a trustee's name. Lifetime medical. A clause that said Emma Collins had never been my wife and had no present or future affiliation with Reed Tech, its officers or assigns. The word assigns did more damage than any comma. I forwarded the document to no one. I walked to the window and watched a barge muscle through the bay like it had earned the water. You can drown in choices that look like options. Read it, Emma asked, coming out of the bedroom in a sweater that said she had slept only because the body requires it. I read the part where they tried to buy a past. I said, "Did you eat?" "Ginger tea and half a banana," she said. "I'm working my way up to heroic." "Let's leave," I said. "Where?" "Anywhere the building staff can't sell the elevator schedule to a gossip blog." I picked up my keys. "Coast Highway. We'll be back by afternoon." She studied my face long enough to test the idea, then nodded. "Fine. But before we go, we should talk to a lawyer who only works for me." "Already lined up," I said. "Oakland, 12:30. We took 101 south to the Great Highway, turned north where the dunes shouldered the asphalt, and let the city fall behind us until it was only geometry. Pacific Light has a way of sanding down the sharp edges on a morning. It didn't change what had to happen next. "Say we go public," Emma said, voice even over the hum of the road. "What does your board do?" "Half argue for crisis containment," I said. "Half argue for my head and your mother." "She doesn't argue," I said. "She escalates." We pulled into an overlook above a strip of beach nobody bothers to name. Wind bullied the waves into white. I turned the engine off. No one pulls you aside to explain this part, the quiet before you choose where to stand. "Do you want the job more than you want the child?" Emma asked. "Not a trap. A measuring tape. I don't know how to be the man I want to be if I choose the job over the child," I said. "And I don't know how to be the CEO my mother wants if I don't." She nodded like a judge who appreciates a clean admission. "Then we'll plan for both truths. We tell it ourselves before anyone else can twist it, and we prepare for them to punish us for it." The Oakland lawyer worked out of a second-floor walk-up over a Salvadoran bakery. No marble, no receptionist performing gatekeeping, just a plaque that said N. Alvarez-esque. She shook Emma's hand first and mine second. That alone made me trust her. "You're not here to be talked out of the pregnancy," Alvarez said after we closed the door. "So let's talk about controlling the narrative, protecting your health, and making sure any money that moves has your name on it or no one's." She built us a plan on a yellow legal pad that smelled faintly of flour and cinnamon. Preemptive filings to lock down our medical privacy. A cease and desist packet aimed at any publication that printed falsified timelines. A statement drafted in Emma's voice, not mine. "If he speaks first, you become a footnote," Alvarez said. "You speak first, or we don't speak at all." "Board comes for my chair the minute I say family at a mic," I said. "Then they were always going to come," Alvarez said. "You can either meet them standing or spend 2 years getting slowly eaten." When we left, my phone had collected missed calls like barnacles, the board chair, the coup, the head of investor relations. And 3 numbers I knew belonged to funds who were friendly until they weren't. I called the board chair from the sidewalk. Vivian Parcom, precise. A woman who can talk 3 hedge funds off a ledge with 2 numbers and a silence. We need to talk. I said, we do, she said. Half the street thinks you're about to blow yourself up on an earnings call. Eleanor briefed me on her position. I'm asking you for yours. She wants to pay to erase a life, I said. I won't let her. Then tell me your path, Vivian said. I can keep the board from moving this afternoon if I have one. I'll step back from the roadshow effective today, I said. I'll appoint Lauren as interim face for investor events. I'll schedule an internal all-hands to level with staff, and I'll make a public statement that acknowledges the pregnancy and asserts our right to privacy while we figure out the rest. Timing. She asked. Tomorrow, I said. Noon. You're not giving me a lot of room to buy time, Alexander. I know. I looked at Emma, who was pretending not to eavesdrop and failing with style. I'm not giving myself a lot of room either. Vivian let me sit in the quiet long enough to feel its weight. Do it clean, she said at last. No self-justifying. No speeches about destiny. If you talk about being a father, write it like you're talking to employees who just want to know if they'll keep their jobs. And Alexander, don't blindside me again. I'm the only vote you still have, because I'm the only one who remembers. You know how to walk through a fire without kicking over the kerosene. We drove back along the water. The city reassembling itself into a skyline that has judged better men than me. I half expected paparazzi at the garage entrance. Instead, I found my mother sitting in the lobby, like a queen exiled from her court for exactly 1 day. Vivian has you on a leash, she said as I approached. She thinks this is about optics. I tried to tell her this is about whether you still understand what you are. What am I, Mother? A machine that turns chaos into consensus, she said, so soft the doorman pretended he couldn't hear. You start thinking you're a man first and you will break the machine. I'm going to say it once, I said, and you can decide whether you want to hear me again after. I am going to be a father, in daylight. You can stand next to me or you can sit in lobbies and deliver sermons. Either way, the cameras will roll. Her eyes went flat. By this time tomorrow, you'll be a lesson they teach young CEOs. Not about courage, about hubris. Maybe, I said, or maybe they'll teach this one about telling the truth before someone sells it for parts. She didn't rise. She didn't waste a threat. She'd already moved to a phase where she lets other people do the threatening for her. Upstairs, Emma was on the phone with Alvarez, reading a draft aloud. She put it on speaker so I could hear. My name is Emma Collins. Some of you know me as the woman the media calls the CEO's wife. I'm also a daughter, and soon, with luck, a mother. I'm not a scandal. I'm a person. So is the child I'm carrying. We'll be making decisions as a family. We ask for your decency while we do. Simple beats eloquent, Alvarez said. You want the public to recognize themselves in you, not worship you. I don't think anyone has to worry about worship, Emma said. We went to bed early and didn't sleep. The phone vibrated on the nightstand as if the building itself had a pulse we couldn't slow. I let it. At 3:11 a.m., the unknown number texted again. Clocks ticking. Your competitors are shopping a story. Name, dates, lab, slips. Choose the company. Or we write you. At 5 o'clock, I showered. Shaved with the kind of care people reserve for weddings and trials. and pressed a white shirt like I had when I still needed interviews to go my way. At 9 o'clock, Vivian texted, "Staff all hands at 10:30. Investor relations is bracing for noon. Do not improvise at 10:25. Emma squeezed my hand and said, "If they take your title today, remember it's a word on a door and not a name." At 10:30, I walked into the auditorium that HR insists on calling a town hall and faced 300 people who make my ideas real for a living. The screen behind me showed a ReadTech logo so clean it looked surgical. "I'm going to be brief," I said. "You've seen the rumors. They're true in the way that matters. I'm going to be a father. Today, Lauren will lead investor events while I handle what's mine at home. Your jobs are not pawns in my life. Our guidance remains our guidance. You'll hear from Vivian on any board-level process this triggers. If you need a reason to trust me beyond a quarterly slide, here it is. I'm telling you the truth before someone sells you a better lie." They didn't clap. They didn't boo. They did what good teams do. They absorbed information and got back to work because code still needs shipping. Whether or not a man learns he has a heart dot at 11:50, I stood in the small studio we used for investor webcasts. The camera lens looked like judgment. Vivian's face appeared in the monitor in a little square from her office downtown. "Keep your shoulders down," she said. "Don't apologize. Don't pontificate." At 12 o'clock, I started. "I'm Alexander Reed. In the next few minutes, you're going to see headlines and posts that try to tell you a story about my life. Here's the version I'm responsible for. I'm going to be a father. ReadTech's work continues as planned. Out of respect for my family's privacy, I won't be entertaining questions about my personal life beyond that. Our interim investor voice will be our CFO, Lauren Ng. You'll hear from her now." We cut. Lauren appeared. She looked like what investors trust: fluent, measured, boring in the complimentary sense. I stepped out of frame and exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been hoarding since I was 9 months old, and someone else signed a paper to keep me here. The phone started vibrating again before I'd cleared the studio. Not texts. News alerts. One headline went for blood. Another went for pity. A third, from a trade pub, did something rare in my experience. It simply reported, "We were almost to the elevator when the doors opened and half a dozen cameras poured out like water from a broken pipe. Someone had sold our security a schedule again. Or someone had simply decided decency was less profitable than footage. Mr. Reed, is she a contract wife?" A voice asked. "Mr. Reed, did you pay her to have the baby?" Another shouted, double quotes, "Ms. Collins, why won't you answer?" A third yelled past me. Emma froze, chin up, shoulders set in that way I recognized from every time she'd chosen to walk through a room that didn't deserve her. I stepped in front of her, not to hide her, but to split the field. "She has a name," I said. "You can use it when you address her. We're done here." My phone buzzed again. "Vivian, pick up." I did. "Upstairs," she said. "Now." On the 14th floor, the boardroom smelled like citrus and old money. Vivian sat at the head, flanked by 3 members who had flown in early and 2 more on screens. My mother was not in the room, which meant she had already been in the calls. "Thank you for the candor," Vivian said. "The board is initiating a formal review of your capacity to serve as CEO during this period. That process runs its course in private. In the meantime, We need you to sign a delegation framework and step back from public-facing roles. If you refuse, we'll do it without your signature." "What about my mother?" I asked. "She has recused herself from any vote in which she is named," Vivian said. "Which is all of them." "Don't read altruism into that sentence." "I didn't," I said. Alexander, the oldest director, said from the end of the table, "The way men address younger men when they're about to tell them how the world works. This is a storm of your own making." "No," I said. "It's a storm of my mother's making and my choosing to walk into it with the lights on." "You think that makes you brave," he said. "No," I said. "I think it makes me visible." We went around and around like adults, pretending this was about governance and not about whether the machine would tolerate a human part. In the end, I signed the delegation and kept my chair for now. That's what boards do when they don't like their options. They circle them and wait for one to die on its own. When I stepped back into the corridor, Emma was leaning against the wall, hands in her coat pockets, like she was holding on to keep from floating. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad," I said, "but survivable if we keep choosing the same thing." "And your mother?" "She'll pick a new battlefield," I said. We rode the elevator down in a silence that didn't need fixing. At the lobby, the doorman wouldn't meet my eyes. I didn't fire him. I walked Emma to the car, opened her door, and asked the only useful question left: "Home?" She shook her head. "Let's drive," she said. "Pick a bridge and we'll figure out the other side when we get there." We took the Bay Bridge because the Golden Gate felt too cinematic. Halfway across, the sun broke through marine layer in a slice that found the dashboard like someone aiming a blessing. It didn't fix anything. "It didn't have to. You did it," she said finally, eyes on the road ahead. "You told the truth before it could be sold. Now we pay for it," I said. "Then we pay," she said. "How much does daylight cost?" "More than you think, less than your soul." By noon the next day, the story had sprouted heads. One tabloid pushed the phrase "contract wife" into a headline big enough to bruise. A tech blog with better grammar hinted at conflict of interest and timelines that don't add up. A finance newsletter ran a probability tree modeling my resignation like whether 40% today, 60 by quarter-end noise is survivable. Malice is different. At 12:17 p.m., a burner number texted Emma's cell. "We know your OB-cute office in Merrin. See you at 3. She read it once, handed me the phone without a word, then walked to the sink and turned on the faucet like her hands needed something cold to hold. I pinged Alvarez, forwarded the screenshot, and called building security to pull every badge log on our floor for the last 24 hours. A minute later, the unknown number found me too. Choose the company or the child loses its father. I took a breath, then another. "Pack a bag," I said. "We're not going to Marin, we're—" "A hotel registered to a shell company you've never heard of," I said, already texting our head of protective services. "You're not walking into an ambush because a stranger bought a schedule. Your mother." Emma asked. "She prefers boardrooms to burner phones," I said. "This is someone else. But she used their mess if it benefits her." Alvarez called back. "I just filed a motion to seal Ms. Collins's medical records under California's Confidentiality of Medical Information Act," she said, "and I have a judge on standby for a TRO against any outlet that publishes private health info. If they try to shop clinic footage, we make examples." "What about the clinic?" Emma asked. "I've already called," Alvarez said. "They're locking down the patient list and moving you to a different provider under a different name. Today, you go nowhere anyone expects. We moved. Our security lead, Hayes, former SFPD, with a jaw built for saying no matters, in the garage with a nondescript SUV and a route that avoided cameras. He swept the elevator with a handheld wand, then stood with his foot between the closing doors and the hallway until we were inside. "We're rotating your patterns," he said as we drove. "No more predictable elevator slots. No morning photos. And if anyone asks where you're staying, you're at your parents' place in Santa Rosa, dealing with plumbing." "I don't have parents in Santa Rosa," I said. "That's why it's a lie," he said without smiling. "It's also boring, which is the point." We took the long way to a boutique hotel in Pacific Heights that my general counsel once used during a hostile takeover fight. The manager didn't blink at a cash deposit or the name on the reservation. Hayes swept the room, set a secondary lock on the door, and stationed himself down the hall with a paperback and a look that said he'd snap any camera that tried to grow legs. Emma sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the wall like it was trying to run a hustle. "How long do we live like fugitives?" she asked. It wasn't panic. It was fatigue wearing a borrowed coat. "Until we make hiding more expensive than leaving us alone," I said. "We do that by telling the truth on our own timetable and costing anyone who tries to jump it." Her mouth turned, not quite a smile. "You talk about lives like supply chains." "It's what I know," I said. "I'm learning as fast as I can." At 2:40, Alvarez sent the draft we'd built the night before, tightened into something with the right temperature. "My name is Emma Collins. I am expecting a child. I am not a scandal. I am a person. So is the child I'm carrying. We ask for decency while we make decisions as a family. We will not be answering questions about our medical care." "Simple," Alvarez said over speaker, "and we hold the line. If anyone asks for more, we negotiate with silence." At 3:10, a different number texted me a photo. The lobby of a clinic in Marin. CGD with a red circle drawn around a woman in a hoodie, who was not Emma. They sent a second photo from a different angle when she lifted her head enough to look like Emma. Most people don't realize what you can build with 2 pixels and malice. I blocked the number and wrote one line to our media team: "Don't chase." We respond with Emma's statement at 5 p.m. and legal letters at 5:05. "Will it matter?" Emma asked.